It is late, and the world outside has grown quiet. Perhaps you are lying in bed, the covers pulled up to your chin, the only light a soft glow from a lamp or the moon through the window. Perhaps you are simply sitting in a comfortable chair, letting the day slip away. Wherever you are, I hope you are warm. That is a good thing to be when the night is dark and the air has that particular chill that comes when the hours grow deep. Warmth is a kind of magic, is it not? A simple, everyday magic that we often take for granted. But tonight, I want to talk about people for whom warmth was not a given. People who crossed the highest, most unforgiving mountains on earth, carrying messages at a speed that would astonish even today. And they did it without freezing. This is a story about the Inca Empire, a civilization that stretched along the spine of South America, from modern-day Colombia all the way down to Chile and Argentina. A civilization of stone, of gold, of roads that snaked through deserts and over peaks that pierced the sky. And at the heart of this empire, there was a network of runners. Not just any runners. These were the chasquis, the messengers of the Inca. They were trained from youth, chosen for their endurance, their loyalty, their ability to run for miles and miles at high altitude without stopping. They carried quipas, those knotted strings that served as a form of record keeping. They carried news, sometimes urgent, sometimes routine. They carried fish from the coast to the highlands, still fresh, because they ran so fast. They carried the will of the emperor, the slip.A Inca, from the capital of Cusco to the farthest corners of the realm. And to do this, they had to cross the Andes. Now, if you have ever been to the Andes, or even looked at a picture of them, you know they are not gentle hills. They are vast, jagged, cold. The air is thin. The wind can cut through you like a knife. The temperature at night can drop far below freezing, even in the summer. Snow and ice are common, even on paths that seem impossibly high. The Inca called these mountains Apu, meaning sacred lord. They were alive in their belief, powerful and demanding. And the chasquis had to traverse them, often alone, often at night, often in conditions that would make a modern mountaineer think twice. So how did they do it? How did these runners, these messengers, cross the Andes without freezing to death? It is a question that has puzzled historians and anthropologists for a long time. And the answer, as with many things about the Inca, is a combination of brilliant design, deep knowledge of the environment, and a little bit of what we might call ancient ingenuity. Let us begin with the roads themselves. The Inca road system, the Quhapac-Nyan, was a marvel of engineering. It stretched over 25,000 miles, from the coast to the mountains, through deserts and jungles. And along these roads, at regular intervals, were way stations called tambos. These were small structures, often just a simple stone building with a roof. Sometimes they were larger, with storage rooms and sleeping quarters. But the key was that they were spaced about a day's run apart, or sometimes less, depending on the terrain. A chasqui would run from one tambo to the next, hand off his message or his goods to another runner, and then rest. He might sleep there, eat a meal of dried meat and corn, wait for the next message to come back. The tambo provided shelter from the wind and the cold, a place to build a small fire, a place to lie down out of the snow. But even with tambos, the stretches between them could be brutal. A chasqui might have to run for miles at altitudes of 12,000, 14,000, even 16,000 feet. The air is so thin at those heights that your lungs burn, your head aches, the cold seeps into your bones, and the Inca had no modern winter clothing. No fleece, no Gore-Tex, no thermal underwear. They had wool. They had llama and alpaca wool, woven into tunics and capes. They had sandals made from llama hide, sometimes with a bit of fabric wrapped around the foot. They had hats, ear flaps, and sometimes a kind of poncho. But to our modern eyes, it does not seem like enough. How could anyone run for hours in freezing temperatures with only wool and sandals? The answer lies in the way they moved, the way they breathed, the way they prepared. The chasquis were not just runners, they were athletes, conditioned from childhood to function at high altitude. They lived in the mountains. Their bodies had adapted. Their lungs were larger, their blood richer in oxygen-carrying red cells. They could run at a steady, loping pace that conserved energy and kept their muscles warm without overheating. They did not sprint. They did not burst. They maintained a pace that could be sustained for hours, a kind of meditation in motion. And they chewed coca leaves. This is a detail that might surprise some listeners, but it is essential to the story. The coca leaf, from which modern cocaine is derived, is a mild stimulant when chewed. It suppresses hunger and thirst, and it can help with the symptoms of altitude sickness. The Inca considered it sacred. They used it in rituals, in offerings, and in daily life. For the chasquis, a small wad of coca leaves tucked in the cheek, mixed with a bit of lime or ash to release the alkaloids, would keep them going. It would dull the pain of cold and exhaustion, give them a steady energy, help them focus on the path ahead. It was not a drug in the way we think of it today. It was a tool, a gift from the gods, a way to endure. But even with all that, the cold was still a threat. The Andes are unforgiving. A sudden storm can drop the temperature by 20 degrees in minutes. Snow can cover the trail, making it invisible. Wind can knock a man off his feet. The chasquis had to know when to stop, when to seek shelter, when to wait. They had to read the sky, the clouds, the behavior of the animals. They had to be patient, and they had to have faith. There is a story, perhaps apocryphal, perhaps true, about a chasqui who was caught in a blizzard high in the mountains. He was alone. The wind was howling. The snow was so thick he could not see his hand in front of his face. He knew he was near a tambo, but he could not find it. He was getting cold, dangerously cold. He could feel the sleepiness, the temptation to just lie down and rest. But he kept moving, kept stumbling forward, kept his arms wrapped around his chest. And then, through the white, he saw a small flicker, a fire. Someone had lit a torch at the tambo, knowing a runner might be coming. He followed that light, and he made it. That light, that small act of kindness across the distance, saved his life. The Inca also used a system of signals. long-distance communication by fire, by smoke, by trumpets made from conch shells. A runner approaching a tambo might blow a horn to alert the next runner, to have food ready, to have a fire lit. They worked as a team, even when they were alone on the trail. The whole network was a living thing, pulsing with messages, with purpose. And they wore layers. The wool they used was not like the scratchy wool of a modern sweater. The llama and alpaca fibers are soft, warm, and breathable. They could be woven into fine cloth that felt good against the skin. A chasqui might wear a tunic, then a cape, then a hat that covered his ears. He might wrap strips of cloth around his legs, under his sandals. He might carry an extra cloak, folded small, to put on when he stopped. The key was to stay dry. Wet wool is cold wool. If you sweat too much, then stop. The moisture will freeze. So they had to regulate their exertion to arrive at the tambo not drenched, but warm and slightly damp. This is a skill that takes years to learn. The Inca also built their roads with the cold in mind. Many of the high mountain passes were lined with stone walls, low but solid, to break the wind. Some sections were paved with flat stones that absorbed heat from the sun during the day and released it slowly at night. Not much, but enough to make a difference. The tambos themselves were often built into hillsides, using the earth as insulation. The roofs were thatched with grass or layered with stone, thick and heavy, holding in the warmth of a small fire. And then there was the food. The chasquis ate a diet that was designed for endurance. Dried llama meat, called charqui, which is where we get the word jerky. Grains like quinoa and kiwicha, toasted and mixed with dried vegetables. A kind of soup called chero, made with freeze-dried potatoes and meat that could be rehydrated quickly. And of course, maize, often popped into something like popcorn, light and easy to carry. They did not eat heavy meals before a run. They ate small amounts frequently, keeping their energy steady. They drank water, but not too much, because stopping to relieve yourself could cost time and expose you to the cold. All of these things together made it possible. The infrastructure, the training, the diet, the clothing, the coca, the discipline. But there is something else, something harder to quantify. The chasquis were not just messengers. They were part of a sacred duty. They were serving the Inca, who was considered a god. They were carrying the words of the empire. Their work was important, vital, honored. That sense of purpose, of being part of something larger than themselves, must have given them strength. It is one thing to run because you have to. It is another to run because you believe. As you lie there, warm and comfortable, think for a moment about those runners. They are long gone now, their voices silent, their footsteps erased by time. But the mountains remain. The same wind that howled through their capes still howls through the passes. The same stars that guided them at night still wheel overhead. And we can imagine them running through the darkness, their breath misting in the cold, their hearts beating steady, their eyes fixed on the path ahead. They were not superheroes. They were humans, using every tool they had, every scrap of knowledge passed down through generations, to do something extraordinary. They crossed the Andes without freezing because they had no choice and because they had learned how. Now, let us step a little deeper into that world. Let us look at the training of a chasqui. How did they become such runners? It did not happen overnight. It began in childhood, in the villages of the highlands. Boys would race each other up hills, down valleys, through streams. They would compete to see who could carry the heaviest, load the farthest. They would practice breathing in the thin air, learning to take slow, deep breaths that filled their lungs completely. Their parents would teach them to read the land, to know which plants were edible, which rocks marked the trail, which caves offered shelter. When a boy was chosen to become a chasqui, he would undergo even more rigorous training. He would run from one tambo to the next, then back again, until his legs felt like stone. He would learn to run at night, using only the stars and the feel of the road beneath his feet. He would learn to run in rain, in hail, in snow. He would learn to run when his body screamed for him to stop. And he would learn to stop when necessary to avoid death. Because the greatest enemy was not the distance, nor the cold itself, but the arrogance of thinking you could beat the mountain. There is a saying among the Andean people, one that has been passed down for centuries. The mountain does not care who you are. It is a humbling thought. The Chasquis understood that. They respected the Apu. They left offerings at the passes, small piles of coca leaves or lumps of llama fat, asking permission to cross. They did not take the mountain for granted. And perhaps that humility, that reverence, kept them warm in ways that wool and fire could not. As the night deepens, you might begin to feel the pull of sleep. That is good. Let your mind drift. Let the images come. A narrow stone path winding up a steep slope, the air cold and clear, the silence broken only by the soft slap of sandals on rock. A lone figure, small against the vastness, moving steadily upward. He carries a kipu, or perhaps a bundle wrapped in cloth. He does not look back. He has a message, and the message must arrive. In the next part of our story, we will follow one particular chasqui on his journey. We will feel the cold creep in, see the stars wheel overhead, and watch him light a small fire in a tambo, huddling close to it, chewing coca, waiting for the dawn. We will see what it truly meant to be a messenger in the Inca Empire, and how the threads of their network held the entire civilization together. But for now, rest. Let the story settle into your mind like a soft blanket. There is no rush. The runners are still out there, in the history books, in the mountains, in the quiet spaces of our imagination. And they will be waiting when you are ready to listen again. Good night. Sleep well. And when you wake, the journey continues. But sleep is not yet here, is it? The night is deep, but your mind is still wandering, still curious. That is how it should be. A story like this one does not end with a single good night. It unravels slowly, like a kipu being untied, thread by thread, knot by knot. So let us stay a little longer in this quiet space. Let us return to the mountains, where the wind is just beginning to calm, and the stars are so bright they seem close enough to touch. We spoke of training, but training is a dry word. What it really means is years of small, unremarkable moments. A boy waking before dawn, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. His father handing him a small pouch of toasted corn and a gourd of water. No words, just a nod. And then the boy runs, not because he is told to, but because it is what he does. He runs along the edge of a terraced field, past the sleeping llamas, up a rocky slope where the ground is still frozen. He runs until his lungs burn and his legs tremble. Then he stops, bends over, catches his breath, and runs back. He does this every morning, even when it rains, even when the hail stings his face, because the mountain does not care if you have a cold. The mountain does not excuse you. And there is something else, something that modern athletes might call mental conditioning. The Chasqui trainee learned to separate his mind from his body. When the pain came, he did not fight it. He acknowledged it. He said to himself, "This is just a feeling. It will pass." And he kept moving. He learned to focus on his breath, the rhythm of his feet, the smell of the air. He learned to find a place inside himself that was still, even when the world was chaos. This is a skill that cannot be taught in a classroom. It is learned through repetition, through failure, through getting up again. The tambos were not just rest stops. They were schools. Experienced Chasquis would teach the younger ones how to read the weather. See how the clouds are gathering around that peak. It will snow in 2 hours. Feel the wind shifting. A storm is coming from the south. They taught them how to find water where there seemed to be none, how to dig for roots that held moisture, how to conserve every drop. They taught them how to treat frostbite by rubbing snow on the skin, gently, never too fast, never with heat. They taught them how to bind a sprained ankle with strips of llama hide, how to make a splint from a branch, how to keep going even when injured. But they also taught them when to stop. This is the most important lesson. The mountain does not forgive stubbornness. If a runner pushed too hard, if he ignored the signs, he could die. And the empire could not afford to lose messengers. So the elders drilled into them, know your limits. If you see that your fingers are turning white, stop and warm them. If you feel dizzy, sit down and rest. If you cannot see the trail, wait for the weather to clear. A message delayed is better than a message lost forever. There is a story passed down through generations of a Chasqui who did not heed this advice. He was young, strong, and proud. He had been chosen for an important run, carrying a message from the Inca himself. The weather was bad, but he thought he could beat it. He ran through a blizzard, refusing to stop, refusing to turn back. He was found the next day, curled up near a rock, frozen. The message was still clutched in his hand, unreadable, ruined by snow and ice. The Inca had to send another runner, a slower one, who took a different route and arrived 3 days late. The delay cost the empire a battle, or so the story goes. It may be legend, but the lesson is real. Humility before the mountain is not weakness. It is wisdom. The Chasquis also had clever ways to keep their feet warm. Sandals made from llama hide, with multiple layers of padding inside. Some runners would stuff dried grass into their sandals, creating an insulating layer. The grass was soft, absorbent, and easy to replace. They would also carry a small pouch of coca leaves mixed with lime, which they would chew slowly during the run. The coca helped suppress hunger and cold, but it was not used carelessly. It was a tool, not a pleasure. They understood its power and respected it. And then there is the matter of sleep. A chasqui on a long relay might travel for days. He would sleep in short bursts, often at the tambos, where a warm blanket of llama wool and a bowl of hot soup awaited him. But sometimes, if the message was urgent, he would not stop at all. He would run through the night, guided by the stars and the white stones that lined the road. The Inca roads were not just paths, they were engineered for clarity. They were broad, straight, and often bordered with stones painted white or placed at regular intervals. Even on a moonless night, a runner could follow the road by feel and by the faint glow of the stones. Imagine running through a high pass at 3 in the morning. The air is so cold it feels sharp in your nostrils. The only sound is your own breathing and the soft crunch of sandals on gravel. Above you, the Milky Way stretches like a river of light, so bright it almost casts a shadow. You are alone, but you are not lonely. You know that somewhere ahead, someone is waiting. A fire is being lit. A torch is being prepared. The relay continues. The Chasquis had a saying, "We run so that others may speak." They were the voice of the empire, carried on the wind, over the mountains, across the rivers. They did not need to shout. Their footsteps were enough. Now, let us travel to a specific tambo high in the Andes, near the pass of La Raya, at an altitude of over 4,000 meters. The year is uncertain, but it is long before the Spanish arrived. The stars are the same as tonight. Inside the tambo, a fire crackles. A chasqui sits on a low stone bench, unwrapping the cloth from his feet. He is an older man, maybe in his 40s, which is ancient for a runner. But he is wise, experienced. His name is not recorded, but we will call him Wilka, which means sacred in Quechua. Wilka has just completed a run from Cusco, a distance of about 200 kilometers over 3 days. He is tired, but not exhausted. He knows his body. He takes off his sandals and examines his feet. They are calloused, with a few blisters, but nothing serious. He rubs them with a paste made from ground herbs and llama fat, a remedy that soothes the skin and prevents infection. He eats a small meal of charqui and boiled quinoa, chewing slowly. He sips a cup of warm water mixed with a pinch of salt. He does not drink coca now, because he will sleep soon. The tambo keeper, a woman named Quiller, meaning star, brings him a bowl of soup. It is chero, the freeze-dried potato and meat soup, thin but nourishing. Wilka thanks her. They exchange a few words, not about the message, because that is secret, but about the weather, the road, the condition of a bridge that was damaged by a landslide. Quiller tells him that the next relay runner, a young man named Wayna, has already arrived and is resting. He will take the message at dawn. Wilka nods. He is glad. He trusts Wayna. The tambo is small, but warm. The walls are stone, packed with mud and straw. The roof is thick thatch, layered to shed rain and snow. The fire pit in the center is lined with clay, and the smoke rises through a hole in the roof. There are no windows, but the door is low, and a heavy wool curtain blocks the draft. Inside, the air is still and smoky, smelling of wood, herbs, and cooking. A few ceramic pots hold dried grains, salt, and coca leaves. In the corner, a pile of llama skins serves as a bed. Wilka lies down, pulling a wool blanket over himself. He closes his eyes. He thinks of his family, far away in a village near the Urubamba River. His son is learning to run. His daughter is learning to weave. He hopes they are warm. He hopes the harvest is good. He says a small prayer to the Apis, the mountain spirits, thanking them for allowing him to pass. Then he sleeps. Meanwhile, Wayna is awake. He is young, barely 18, with a runner's lean build and restless energy. He cannot sleep before a run. He lies on his back, staring at the shadowy ceiling, listening to the wind outside. He is nervous, but excited. This will be his first long relay, a message from the Inca to a provincial governor about a tribute collection. It is not a matter of life and death, but it is important. He has trained for this his whole life. He goes over the route in his mind. From this tambo, he will run south, down into a valley, then up another pass, then along a ridge to the next tambo, about 15 kilometers away. The terrain is rough, but the trail is well marked. He will carry a quipu, a knotted cord that encodes the message. He has been taught how to read it, how to interpret the knots, the colors, the twists. He knows it is a list of numbers and a few instructions. He does not know the content, only the pattern. That is enough. He checks his gear. His tunic is made of fine alpaca wool, tightly woven. He has a cape of vicuña wool, lighter than air but incredibly warm. He has a hat that covers his ears, and leg wraps made of llama hide. He has a pouch of coca, a gourd of water, a small bag of toasted maize. He also carries a conch shell trumpet, which he will blow when he approaches the next tambo to signal his arrival. He hears Wilka snoring softly. He smiles. He is ready. Dawn comes slowly. The first light is gray, then pink, then golden. The snow on the peaks glows. Wayna steps outside. The air is biting cold but clear. No clouds. A good day. He does a few stretches, then begins to run. Not fast, not slow. A steady pace, one that he can maintain for hours. His sandals hit the stone path. The rhythm is familiar, like a heartbeat. He passes a small shrine, a pile of stones with a few coca leaves on top. He adds his own offering, a single leaf, and says a quick prayer. He runs on. The valley opens below him, green and brown, with a river glinting in the morning light. He breathes deep. The air is thin, but he is used to it. His lungs have adapted over years of training. He thinks about the people who built this road. He knows that his ancestors, generations ago, laid these stones by hand. They cut into the mountainside, filled ravines, built retaining walls, all without iron tools, without wheels, without horses. They did it for the empire, for the Inca, for the future. And now he is running on their work. He feels a connection, a debt. He is part of a chain that stretches back centuries. He passes a group of llamas grazing on a high meadow. Their herder, a boy of maybe 12, waves. Wayna waves back. They share a moment, two humans in a vast landscape, acknowledging each other's presence. Then Waina is past, running on. At midday, he reaches the next tambo. A runner named Tika is waiting. They exchange the kipu quickly, a few words about the condition of the trail. Tika has been resting, eating, warming himself. He is fresh. Waina hands over the message, then sits down, allowing himself to rest. He drinks water, chews some coca, breathes. He feels good. His muscles are working, but not strained. He has another run later, but for now, he can rest. Tika takes off. Waina watches him disappear around a bend. He feels a quiet satisfaction. The message is moving. The empire is connected. He is part of something. And that, perhaps, is the deepest secret of the Chasquis. They were not merely couriers. They were the arteries of a civilization. Their runs were not lonely, they were communal. Every runner knew that he was one of many. The tambo keepers, the road builders, the farmers who grew the food, the weavers who made the cloth, the children who dreamed of running one day, all of them were part of the same network. The message was not just words. It was the pulse of the Andean world. As the sun arcs overhead and begins its descent, Waina lies down in the tambo, letting his eyes close. He listens to the wind, the distant bleat of a llama, the crackle of the fire. He thinks about the road ahead, the miles yet to be run. But for now, there is only this moment. Warm, safe, part of a chain that stretches into the past and reaches toward the future. So lie still, listener. Let the images drift. The road is long, but the journey is gentle. And we are all, in some way, Chasquis, carrying messages of our own, crossing our own mountains, finding warmth where we can. And yet, the story does not end with Waina's rest. There is another messenger, another night, another trail, and another kind of warmth to discover. Let us shift our gaze a little south to a different tambo, one tucked into a narrow valley, not far from the great salt flats of Maras. This tambo is older, smaller, built into the side of a cliff, its walls stained with centuries of smoke and wind. The keeper here is a woman named Sumac, which means beautiful, but she is old now, her face lined with the kind of patience that comes from watching snow melt and stars wheel across the sky for 50 winters. Sumac is not a runner, but she is just as vital. She tends the fire, she boils the water, she stores the dried potatoes and the charqui. She knows the runners who pass through, their names, their habits, their small quirks. Some are silent and serious, others chatty and nervous. One, a young man named Nina, meaning fire, always sings softly to himself as he runs. Another, an older Chasqui named Puma, always leaves an offering of coca leaves on the small shrine outside the door, even when the wind is howling and the hail stings his face. Sumac watches them come and go. She knows that they are the blood of the empire, but she also knows that the empire lives in the small, steady acts of people like her. Tonight, the tambo is quiet. The fire is low, just embers. Sumac sits on a low stool, spinning llama wool into thread. The spindle drops and twists, a rhythm as old as the Andes. She hums a melody that her grandmother taught her, a song about the moon and the rain. Outside, the wind picks up, but the tambo is snug. The roof is thick, the walls solid. The only crack is a tiny gap where the stone meets the timber, and a thin ribbon of cold air slips in, but Sumac has placed a woven cloth over it. She is practical. Then she hears it. A footstep, soft but deliberate. Then another. It is a runner, but not the usual kind. The step is lighter, more careful. She sets down her spindle and stands, lifting the wool curtain that covers the doorway. A figure stands there, wrapped in a dark cape, hood pulled low. For a moment, Sumac feels a flicker of unease. But then the figure pushes back the hood, and she sees a face she does not recognize. It is a woman, perhaps in her mid-20s, with sharp cheekbones and bright, alert eyes. She carries a small quipu, knotted with fine cords of camelid wool. The woman speaks, her voice low and steady. She says her name is Inti, which means sun. She says she has come from a village 3 days to the north, carrying a message about the completion of a new terraced field. She says she is not a regular chasqui, not trained in the formal system, but she was asked to bring this news to the local curaka, the village chief, because the regular runner fell ill. She is a farmer, a weaver, a mother. She has never run such a distance before, but she knows the trails because she has walked them since childhood, carrying bundles of potatoes or wool to market. Sumac looks at her closely. She sees the fatigue in the woman's posture, the way she leans slightly toward the fire, the deep shadows under her eyes. She sees the blisters on her feet, visible through the open straps of her sandals. Sumac says nothing, only gestures for her to enter. Inti steps inside, and the warmth of the fire washes over her. She shudders, not from cold, but from a sudden release of tension. She has been running, or rather walking fast, for 2 days. She stopped only to sleep a few hours under a rocky overhang, wrapped in her cape. She has not eaten properly. She is near the end of her strength. Sumac leads her to the bench near the fire, then busies herself preparing a bowl of soup. She uses the same freeze-dried potatoes, the same dried meat, but she adds a handful of wild herbs she gathered last summer, and a pinch of chili for warmth. She also pours boiling water into a clay cup, adds a few coca leaves, and lets it steep. She hands both to Inti. "Drink first," she says. "The soup will come after." Inti takes the cup of coca tea. It is warm, slightly bitter, with a faint green aroma. She sips slowly. She can feel the stimulation, subtle but real, the way the leaves release their alkaloids, opening her lungs, softening the ache in her legs. She has used coca before, but never like this, never as a remedy for exhaustion. Her mother used to chew it when she worked in the fields, but it was a different ritual, more casual. Here, in the quiet of the tambo, with the firelight flickering, the tea feels like a gift, a small ceremony of renewal. Sumac sits across from her, watching. She does not ask about the message. That is not her place. But she says, "You ran well. The mountain spoke of you." She means it as a compliment, an acknowledgement that the land itself feels the passage of a determined traveler. Inti smiles faintly, a small crack in her weary composure. She says, "I am not a runner. I am just a woman who needed to deliver a few knotted strings." But Sumac shakes her head. She has seen many runners, and she knows that the best ones are not always the ones who train from childhood. Sometimes the best ones are those who run because the message matters, because someone is waiting, because the land itself demands it. Inti, she says, you ran through the night. You crossed the pass of the condor, and you did not freeze. That is not nothing. She gestures toward Inti's feet. Let me see your feet. Inti hesitates, then extends one leg. Sumac takes her foot in her hands, old and calloused, but gentle. She examines the blisters, the raw patches. She clucks softly. Then she reaches for a small clay pot near the fire. Inside is a paste of ground herbs and llama fat, the same remedy Wilka used in the other tambo. Sumac applies it to Inti's feet, working it into the skin with slow, circular motions. It smells earthy, a little sharp, but it soothes immediately. Inti closes her eyes. She lets herself be cared for. She thinks about her village, her family, the field she left behind. She thinks about the Curaka, who will receive her message and know that the new terraces are ready for planting. She thinks about the Inca, far away in Cusco, who will never know her name, but who depends on her, on all the runners, all the keepers, all the farmers who coax food from thin soil. She feels small, but not insignificant. She is part of something vast, something that breathes through the mountains. After the soup, she sleeps. She does not dream, or if she does not remember. She wakes once in the night to the sound of the wind and the soft crackle of the fire. Sumac is still awake, still spinning, her silhouette a dark shape against the embers. She has not slept. She will stay awake until dawn, tending the fire, keeping the tambo warm for the next runner. Inti murmurs a thanks, but Sumac only nods, and then Inti sinks back into a deep, restful darkness. Morning comes slowly. The light is dim, filtered through clouds. A thin drizzle begins to fall, pattering on the stone roof. Inti wakes feeling stiff, but better. Her feet are still tender, but the blisters have dried. She eats a small breakfast of toasted maize and dried fish, provided by Sumac. She also takes a few coca leaves, placing them in her cheek pouch. She will chew them as she walks. She dresses, wraps her cape tightly, and steps outside. The rain is cold, but not freezing. The trail is muddy, but passable. Sumac stands at the door, a small bundle in her hands. She presses it into Inti's hands. It is a woven cloth, soft and warm, made of alpaca wool. For your journey, she says. It is small enough to tuck inside your cape, but large enough to cover your head if the hail comes. Inti thanks her. She cannot express the depth of her gratitude, so she simply meets Sumac's eyes and nods. Then she turns and begins to walk, her pace steady, her mind calm. She follows the trail along the edge of the valley. The rain washes the dust from the stones, and the air smells of wet earth and wild mint. She chews the coca leaves, feeling the familiar stimulation, but also a strange sense of peace. She thinks about the message. It is a simple quipu with a few knots and a single pendant cord. It encodes the number of terraces completed, the number of days it took, and the name of the head worker. That is all. But that is enough. The empire runs on such details. Without them, the Inca would not know where to send the next shipment of seeds, when to expect the harvest. whether to be grateful or concerned. She also thinks about the chain of people who made this journey possible. The road builders who cut the stones and laid them so carefully that they have not moved in centuries. The tambo keepers like Sumac, who offer warmth and food and healing. The farmers who grow the potatoes and the maize. The weavers who spin the wool for the cloth. And the runners, the dozens of chasquis she has never met, who carry their own bundles of knotted strings, their own hopes and fears, across the same ridges and passes. She is not special. She is simply one of them, a single knot in a very long cord. Hours pass. The rain stops, and the clouds lift, revealing patches of blue sky. The sun comes out, warm on her face. She passes a small village where children wave from a doorway. She waves back. She pauses for a drink of water from a rocky spring. She eats a handful of toasted maize. She keeps walking. By late afternoon, she reaches the next tambo. It is larger than Sumac's, built near a crossroads where two trails meet. A young man is outside, stretching his legs, preparing for a run. He sees her approach, and his eyes widen slightly. He had not expected a runner today, let alone a woman, but he quickly recovers. He nods and steps aside, gesturing for her to enter. Inside, a fire burns, and a pot of soup bubbles. A keeper, an older man with a kind face, offers her a seat. She sits, and because the message is not secret, terraces are not a matter of state, she speaks of it freely. The young runner, whose name is Tidu, listens with interest. He is a chasqui by training, but he respects that she came on her own. He says, "You carry the message of the earth. That is sacred." She laughs softly, a little tired, a little happy. She had not thought of it that way. But yes, she supposes it is sacred. The earth feeds them all. And to tell the Inca that the earth has been prepared is a kind of prayer. Tidu asks if she wants him to take the kipu the rest of the way. He can run to the next tambo, which is only a few hours away, and from there it will reach the Curaca by nightfall. She hesitates, but only for a moment. She is tired, her feet ache. She did what she set out to do. She hands him the kipu, the small cluster of knotted cords. He takes it with reverence, tucking it into a leather pouch at his waist. He says, "I will carry it as if it were my own heartbeat." That night, she sleeps in the tambo. She eats well, she cleans her feet, she sleeps without dreaming. She wakes once to the sound of voices, Tidu returning from his run, reporting to the keeper that the message was delivered, that the Curaca nodded and smiled. She is too tired to ask for details. She sinks back into sleep, feeling the warmth of the fire, the weight of the blanket. And so the message traveled. A simple thing, a few knots in a cord, but it moved across the Andes because of trust, because of care, because of the quiet courage of ordinary people who did not think of themselves as heroes. They were just farmers, weavers, keepers, mothers, sons. They were just doing what needed to be done. Perhaps, listener, you have carried a message yourself. Not a kipu, not a scroll, but a word of comfort to a friend, a piece of news to a family member, a small act of kindness that traveled a long way. And perhaps you did not feel heroic either, but maybe you were. Maybe every message, no matter how small, is part of a vast network of care that keeps the world warm, keeps it connected, keeps it beating. So let your eyes close. Let the Andean night wrap around you. Feel the distant firelight of the tambo, the smell of smoke and herbs. Hear the soft footfall of a runner on the trail, a rhythm older than memory. You are not lost. You are part of the same journey, the same slow and steady pace. And somewhere, someone is waiting for your message, whether or not you have yet sent it. The road is long, but the journey is gentle, and the warmth is always there, waiting for you to arrive. And so, dear listener, you might imagine yourself lying in a quiet room, the darkness soft around you, the weight of a blanket on your chest. The world outside is still, or if it is not still, you cannot hear it. You are safe. You are warm. And somewhere far away, across mountains you have never seen, a woman named Inti is asleep in a stone shelter, her feet wrapped in cloth, her breath slow and even. She does not know that her message has already reached another pair of hands, that Titu has run with it through the dusk, that the Curaka has received it and smiled. But she will know tomorrow. For now, she rests. And perhaps you wonder about the other messengers, the ones who run while Inti sleeps. For the empire does not pause. Even in darkness, a few runners move along the trails, guided by starlight or by the faint glow of a quarter moon. They wear sandals that have been softened by months of use, and they carry quippas that tell of births and deaths, of harvests and festivals, of the Inca's orders and the people's needs. They do not run fast, because running fast would be reckless on these paths. They run at a steady jog, a rhythm that matches their breath. One runner might cover 30 miles in a night, passing from tambo to tambo, handing his burden to the next runner, who then continues the relay. They never stop moving, but they also never rush. Rushing leads to falls, to injuries, to messages lost. The empire is patient. It has been built over centuries, and it will last for as long as the mountains stand. But empires do not last forever, as you might know. The Inca Empire would fall, eventually, to foreign invaders, to disease, to the grinding weight of history. But on this night, in this moment, none of that has happened yet. The empire is young, strong, alive. The roads are clean. The tambos are stocked. The people work the fields and sing songs about the sun. And the messengers run because the empire depends on them and because they believe in what they are doing. That belief is not a loud thing, not a shout or a declaration. It is a quiet certainty, like the knowledge that spring will follow winter, that the river will flow downhill, that the fire will keep the cold away. It is woven into the fabric of their lives. Consider for a moment a Chasqui named Wayna. He is young, barely 15, but he has been running since he could walk. His father was a runner, and his grandfather, and his great-grandmother, who once carried a message from Cusco to the edge of the jungle in 4 days. Wayna has not yet done anything so famous, but he is proud of his work. Tonight, he sits in a tambo high on a ridge, waiting for the next runner to arrive. He has been waiting for 2 hours. The fire crackles. The keeper, an old woman named Tika, hums a tune while she stirs a pot of quinoa soup. Wayna is hungry, but he will not eat until he has run. That is part of the discipline. He fills his mouth with coca leaves and chews slowly, feeling the bitter taste spread across his tongue. The leaves help him stay alert, but they also make him hungry for something more. He thinks about his mother's cooking, the little tamales she makes with cheese and chili, wrapped in corn husks and steamed over a fire. He used to eat them at dawn before the day's work. Now he eats them in memory while he waits. Tika looks at him and smiles. She has seen many runners pass through this tambo, many boys and young men and women who have come in the night, handed off their quippas, and run out again. She knows the signs of a good runner: the calm eyes, the steady breathing, the willingness to sit still even when the body wants to move. Waina has those signs. She says to him, "Not long now. The runner from the south should be here soon. The stars say it is nearly time." Waina nods. He does not ask how Tika knows. She has been here for 40 years, and she has learned to read the sky, the wind, the feel of the air. He trusts her. He takes a sip of warm water from a clay cup, the water flavored with a slice of dried lemon. He swallows and closes his eyes. He lets his thoughts drift, like smoke rising from the fire. He remembers a story his father told him about a runner who once carried a message across the pass at the height of winter. The snow was deep, the wind so strong that it could knock a man off his feet. The runner wrapped a llama-skin cloak around himself and kept moving. He did not stop to rest, because if he stopped, he would freeze. He reached the tambo just as the storm reached its peak, and he fell through the door, his fingers white with frost. The keeper that night rubbed his hands with fat and wrapped them in wool, and the runner survived. He was called the Condor of the Snows, and his name was remembered for many years. Waina does not want to be remembered. He just wants to do his job, to run his leg of the relay, to go home and sleep in his own bed. But he also knows that some jobs become stories, whether you want them to or not. The mountains are full of stories, drifting like clouds, waiting for someone to tell them. He wonders if he will become a story someday. Probably not, and that is fine. The quiet ones are the most important, his father used to say. The ones who do the work without needing praise. They are like the stones that hold up the wall. You do not see them, but without them, the wall falls. The sound of footsteps outside pulls Waina from his thoughts. He opens his eyes. Tika is already at the door, lifting the cloth that covers it. A figure stands in the darkness, breathing hard. It is a woman, older than Waina, with a kipu in her hand. She steps inside, and Tika guides her to the fire. The woman sits heavily, her legs trembling. She has been running for 3 hours straight from the tambo at the next valley. Waina watches as Tika hands her a cup of water, then a bowl of soup. The woman drinks, eats, and finally looks up at Waina. She holds out the kipu. He takes it. The cords are warm from her hand. He examines them briefly, noting the sequence of knots, a message about a new bridge being completed across a river, the number of workers needed for the next phase. It is routine, but important. He thanks the runner, tucks the kipu into his own pouch, and stands. His legs feel ready. He stretches his arms, loosens his shoulders. Tika brings him a small bundle of toasted maize and dried meat for the road. He stuffs it into his pouch. He does not eat now. He will eat after the first hour. He steps outside. The air is cold, sharp, clean. The stars are bright, scattered across a sky so dark it seems to breathe. He looks at them for a moment, picking out the familiar constellations. The fox, the llama, the river of stars that the Inca call Mayu. He knows that the stars are not just lights. They are the eyes of the ancestors, watching over the living. He feels their gaze, and it is not a weight. It is a comfort, a reminder that he is never truly alone. He begins to run. Not fast, just a steady jog, his sandals slapping softly on the stones. The trail is familiar, having run it a dozen times. He knows where the loose rocks are, where the trail narrows, where the wind tends to howl. He adjusts his pace, conserving his energy. The first mile passes easily. The second is fine. By the third, he enters a rhythm, his body moving almost without thought. His lungs expand and contract like a bellows. His heartbeat is regular, a distant drum. He chews the coca leaves, and the bitterness keeps him alert. The trail climbs gradually, ascending a long slope toward a pass. The air grows thinner, cooler. Wayna does not stop. He knows that if he stops to catch his breath, he will have to start again, and that will be harder. He just keeps moving, one foot in front of the other, up and up. The stars wheel overhead. The moon, a thin crescent, hangs low on the horizon. He thinks about the new bridge, the one being built across the river. He imagines the workers, hauling stones, laying ropes. He imagines the finished bridge, a strong, graceful arch that will carry people and goods for years to come. His message will tell the Inca that the bridge is ready, that the ropes are taut, that the stones are set. And then the Inca will order the next stage, and the empire will grow a little stronger. He reaches the pass. The wind hits him like a wall, cold and fierce. He lowers his head, pulling his cape tighter. He squints against the dust, but he does not slow down. He has run this pass many times, and he knows that the wind is strongest at the very top. Once he descends a little, it will be calmer. So he pushes through, leaning into the gusts, his legs burning, his lungs aching. He does not feel like a condor. He feels like a small, stubborn animal crawling across the skin of the earth. Then he is over the top, and the wind drops. The trail descends gently into a valley, where a cluster of lights flickers, the next tambo. He can see smoke rising from the chimney, and he imagines the warmth inside, the fire, the bowl of soup. He is hungry. He is tired, but he does not stop. He keeps running, because that is what he does. He reaches the tambo in less than an hour. The door is open, and a young woman stands outside, waiting. She is the next runner. Her name is Kispi, and she is ready. She takes the quipu from Wayna, examines it quickly, and nods. She says, "The bridge is complete." He nods back. She smiles, a quick flash of teeth. Good. The Inca will be pleased. And then she is off, running into the darkness before Wayna can even catch his breath. He watches her go, a shadow disappearing into the night. Then he turns and enters the tambo. The keeper, a man named Cusi, greets him with a bowl of soup and a seat by the fire. Wayna sits. He eats. He lets the heat seep into his bones. He does not speak for a long time. He simply sits and watches the flames. Later, when he has finished eating, QC brings him a cup of warm herbal tea made from chamomile and mint. Wayna thanks him and drinks. He asks how many runners tonight. QC shrugs. You are the third. There will be one more before dawn, carrying news from the west. The road never sleeps, Wayna. You know that. Wayna nods. He knows. He is part of a chain that stretches across the mountains, across the desert, across the river. He is a link, a knot, a thread in a vast tapestry. He does not need to see the whole tapestry. He only needs to hold his part, to keep it strong. That is enough. He finishes the tea, then curls up on a pile of blankets near the fire. The keeper banks the fire, adding a few large logs that will burn slowly through the night. The room is warm, safe. Wayna listens to the wind outside, the crackling of the flames. He thinks about Kispy running through the darkness, the kipu bouncing against her chest. He thinks about the bridge, standing solidly over the river. He thinks about the Inca, perhaps asleep in his palace, dreaming of a thriving empire. And he thinks about his own bed, his own village, his own people. He will go home in the morning. He will rest for 2 days, and then he will run again. That is his life. It is a good life. His eyes close. The warmth wraps around him like a blanket of soft wool. He hears QC humming, a low, tuneless song. The sound is gentle, like the murmur of a stream. Wayna drifts. He feels the ground beneath him, solid and real. He feels the sky above him, vast and distant. He is suspended between them, a small creature in a large world. But he is not afraid. He is part of it, and it is part of him. So let your own eyes grow heavy, listener. Let the story of the runners carry you into sleep. Feel the rhythm of their feet, the steady beat of their hearts. Imagine the tambos scattered across the mountains, each one a tiny lighthouse in the dark, each one a home for the weary messenger. The empire is gone now, but the roads remain, buried under grass and rubble. Yet still, if you listen closely, you can hear the echo of footsteps, the soft pad of sandals on stone. It is the sound of people doing what they must, carrying their messages, their hopes, their simple truths across a world that is both beautiful and harsh. And tonight, you do not need to run. You do not need to carry anything except yourself, your breath, your quiet heart. The fire is warm. The blanket is soft. The night is deep. Let it hold you. Let it take you into its gentle darkness where no roads lead and no messages are required. Just rest. Just be. Because somewhere in a valley you will never visit, a young runner named Wayna is dreaming of the stars. And somewhere else, a keeper named Tika is humming her song. And the message that was carried, the simple news of a bridge, will reach its destination, and the empire will continue. But you have arrived. You are home. Sleep well. And perhaps, listener, you too are being held by something vast and unseen tonight. Perhaps you are a link in a chain you cannot see, a quiet messenger in your own life, carrying small burdens from one day to the next. The Inca messengers did not know the full shape of the empire they served. They knew only the path before them, the next tambo, the next runner's hand reaching out to take the kipu. And in that way, They built something greater than themselves. They built a living web of attention and care, a system that pulsed with every heartbeat, every breath, every footfall. There is a word in the Quechua language that is hard to translate directly into English. It is the word nyawi, which can mean to see, to watch over, to tend with the eyes. The messengers did not just carry information. They nyawied the empire. They looked at the bridges, the roads, the storehouses, and they carried the gaze of the Inca across the land. Each runner was a pair of eyes moving through the mountains, seeing that the world was still in order, that the threads were still woven tight. And when they reached the tambo, they passed that gaze to the next runner, like a lantern handed from hand to hand in the dark. And what did they see, these runners, as they moved through the night? They saw the slow shift of constellations, the way the fox climbed higher as the season turned toward harvest. They saw the silhouette of a deer motionless on a ridge, watching them pass. They saw the distant glow of a village fire, a cluster of tiny lights far below, and they knew that in that village, people were sleeping, or waking to tend a child, or sharing a quiet word before dawn. The runners saw the empire not as a map, not as a list of provinces and populations, but as a fabric of small moments, each one real, each one fragile, each one worthy of the journey. And perhaps there is a lesson in that for you, listener, as you lie here in the dark, letting the weight of the day slip from your shoulders. Perhaps you do not need to see the whole tapestry. Perhaps you only need to hold your own small thread to keep it strong and true. The rest will be carried by others, just as the runners carried their quipus across the passes. You are not alone in the night. There are others running their own paths, carrying their own burdens, and the web of the world holds them all. It is late, and the fire in Wena's tambo has burned low. The keeper Cusi has settled into his own corner, wrapped in a thick lamoul blanket. The only sound is the soft hiss of embers and the occasional creak of the roof beams as the wind shifts. Wena is deep in sleep now, his breathing slow and even. He dreams of the bridge. In his dream, the bridge is made of light, a shimmering arc across a river of stars. He walks across it, and each step sends ripples through the fabric of the night. He reaches the far side, and there is the Inca waiting, holding out a hand. But the Inca does not speak. He simply nods, and Wena understands that the bridge is more than stone and rope. It is a promise, a connection between worlds. And then the dream shifts, and Wena is walking through a forest of tall, slender trees whose leaves whisper in a language he almost understands. The forest is the empire, and each tree is a messenger, standing still and patient, waiting for the wind to carry their message. Wena stops and places his hand on one of the trunks. He feels the pulse of something deep and alive. He is part of it, and it is part of him. But let us leave Wena to his dreaming, listener. Let us step back from the tambo and look at the wider night. The mountains rise and fall like the breath of a sleeping giant. The valleys are dark and silent, save for the occasional cry of a night bird or the distant bark of a fox. The roads of the Inca stretch like veins across the land, linking one valley to the next, one village to the next, one life to the next. And the runners are the blood that flows through these veins, carrying the messages that keep the body alive. Tonight, there are dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, strung out across the empire at different points along the road. Some are young, like Kispi, just beginning their service. Some are older, like the woman with the gray hair at the first tambo, who has run these paths for 30 years. Some are running with quippas that carry news of war, of famine, of celebration. Some are running with nothing but their own thoughts, their own breath, their own steady rhythm. And each of them, in their own way, is doing something remarkable. They are moving through a landscape that is hostile to human life, at altitudes that make the lungs ache, through temperatures that can freeze the breath in your throat. But they do not think of themselves as remarkable. They think of themselves as ordinary, as necessary, as part of the daily rhythm of the empire. They do their job, and they go home, and they sleep, and they wake, and they do it again. That is perhaps the most remarkable thing of all, listener. The ordinary courage of doing the same thing day after day, night after night, even when the path is hard and the air is thin. The courage of a mother waking to feed her child, of a farmer tending his fields under a blazing sun, of a messenger running through the dark with a handful of knotted cords. It is not heroic in the way of stories. It is quiet and steady, and it builds a world. The Inca Empire is long gone now. Its roads are broken, its tambos are ruins, its runners are dust. But the courage remains. It is alive in every act of care, every small kindness, every moment of attention. It is alive in the hands that prepare a meal, the feet that walk a familiar path, the eyes that watch over a sleeping child. The empire of the Inca was a vast and complex thing, but at its heart, it was simply people doing their best, carrying their messages, holding the web together. And you, listener, you are part of that same web. You may not be running through the Andes tonight. You may not be carrying a quipu or chewing coca leaves against the altitude, but you are carrying something. Perhaps it is a worry, a hope, a memory. Perhaps it is just the weight of your own tired body settling into the comfort of your bed. Whatever it is, you carry it with the same quiet grace as the messengers. You move through your own night, one breath at a time, one step at a time, and you arrive where you need to be. So rest now. Let the mountains recede into the darkness. Let the sound of running feet fade into a soft whisper, like wind through grass. Let the warmth of the tambo, of Wena's dream, of the fire that never fully goes out, wrap around you until you cannot tell where you end and the world begins. You do not need to hold on. You do not need to run. You only need to be here in this moment, soft and still and safe. The stars are still out there, wheeling above the peaks. The runners are still moving along the ancient roads, carrying their messages through the dark. And you, listener, are drifting now, carried by a different current, toward a rest that is deep and true. There is no message to deliver. There is no bridge to complete. There is only the quiet, the dark, and the slow, gentle tide of sleep. Let it take you. Let it hold you. You are as much a part of this story as Wena, as Kispi, as the keeper Cusi humming by the fire. The story does not end. It simply continues, in the soft rhythm of your breath, in the stillness of your hands, in the peace that has settled over your heart. Sleep well, listener. The road will be there in the morning, but tonight there is only this. But perhaps you are not quite ready to sleep yet, listener. Perhaps there is one more story that wants to be told, one more thread of the tapestry that has not yet been pulled into the light. The night is long and patient, and the fire in the tambo is only embers now, but the memory of the runners lingers like the scent of smoke in wool. So let us linger a little longer, here in the quiet, before we let go entirely. Let us go back to the moment when Kispi, the young messenger we met earlier, first felt the weight of the kipu in his hands. It was not a heavy weight, not in the way of stones or burdens. It was a weight of meaning, of responsibility, of knowing that the cords he carried held the words of the governor himself. He had trained for months, running shorter routes, learning to read the knots with his fingertips, memorizing the pattern of colors and twists that told the story of harvests and taxes and the movement of troops. But this was his first real run, his first time carrying a message that could change the fate of a valley. He had started at dawn, when the sky was still pink and the frost lay thick on the grass. The keeper at his home tambo had handed him the kipu with both hands, a gesture of respect that made Kispi's heart beat faster. The keeper had said only one word, run, and so Kispi ran. He ran through the morning light, past fields of quinoa and potatoes, past llamas grazing on steep slopes, past women weaving at their looms by the side of the road. He ran with the steady rhythm his father had taught him, a rhythm that matched the pulse of the earth itself. He did not think about the distance. He did not think about the altitude. He thought only about the next step, and the next, and the next. By midday, the sun was high and the air was thin. He stopped at a tambo, where an old man gave him water and a handful of popped quinoa, the same food the runners had eaten for generations. The old man did not ask where Kispi was going or what he carried. He simply nodded, as if to say, I know the road, I know the weight, I know the way. And Kispi rested for a few moments, leaning against the stone wall, feeling the heat of the sun on his face, before he stood up and ran again. It was on the second day that the wind rose. It came howling down from the high peaks, carrying a cold that cut through his wool tunic and bit at his cheeks. Kispi pulled his likla tighter around his shoulders. The woven cloth his mother had made for him, dyed with the deep red of cochineal and the brown of walnut. He thought of her hands, the way she had tied the fringe with careful knots, the way she had blessed the garment before he left. The wind could not touch that warmth, not really. It could only push at his body, making him lean into the gusts like a tree bent by the storm. And still he ran. The road became steeper, the stones looser under his sandals. He had to slow his pace, picking his way carefully, watching for places where the path had crumbled. He thought of the bridges he would cross, the swaying rope bridges that spanned the deep gorges. He had practiced on them during his training, had learned to feel the rhythm of the sway, to trust the cables, even when they groaned under his weight. But practice was not the same as the real thing, and he knew that the bridge ahead was one of the longest in the region, spanning a river that roared far below. When he reached the bridge, the sun was setting. The sky was a deep orange, the mountains turned to silhouettes, and the bridge seemed to hang in the air like a web of shadows. Kispi paused at the edge, feeling the familiar flutter of fear in his chest. He had heard stories of messengers who had fallen, their bodies lost in the river below, their quipus never delivered. But he had also heard stories of messengers who had crossed in the dark, in the rain, in the blinding snow, and had made it to the other side with nothing but the message in their hands. He took a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs, and he stepped onto the bridge. The ropes creaked and swayed, and the planks shifted under his feet. He did not look down. He looked ahead at the far side, at the faint outline of the tambo, where another runner would be waiting to take the quipu and carry it forward. He moved slowly, deliberately, his hand gripping the side ropes with white-knuckled strength. The wind tried to push him off balance, but he had learned to shift his weight, to move with the sway, to become part of the bridge instead of fighting it. Halfway across, he stopped, not because he wanted to, but because something caught his eye. A small stone, wedged between two planks, carved with a simple pattern of lines and spirals. He had seen such stones before, left by travelers as offerings to the mountain spirits, to ask for safe passage. He reached down and touched it, his fingers tracing the grooves. And in that moment, he felt connected to everyone who had crossed this bridge before him, every runner, every trader, every pilgrim who had left a stone behind. The bridge was not just a structure of rope and wood. It was a thread woven by countless hands, each one leaving a small mark of hope. He left a stone of his own, a small, smooth pebble he had picked up at the last tambo, carrying with him for just this purpose. He placed it beside the carved stone, and he whispered a word, the same word his father had whispered when he crossed his first bridge. Uchirunku, the jaguar, the spirit of strength and courage. Then he stood up, and he finished the crossing. On the far side, the keeper was waiting with a warm drink and a blanket. He took the quipu from Kispi's hands, handling it with the same reverence the first keeper had shown. He did not open it, did not read the knots. That was for the next messenger, or the governor, or the Inca himself. He simply stored it in a leather pouch, hung it on a peg, and nodded at Kispi. "You have done well," he said. "Rest now." Kispi sat by the fire, watching the flames dance. His legs ached, his feet were sore, and his lungs still burned with the cold. But he felt a quiet joy, a sense of having done something real, something that mattered. He thought of the governor, who had spoken the words that were now knotted into the cords, and he thought of the people who would be affected by those words. Perhaps it was news of a festival, or the announcement of a new road, or the command for a levy of labor. Whatever it was, it would travel through him, through his breath and his steps, and it would change the world in some small way. He looked up at the stars, and he saw the same constellations the old keeper had named for him when he was a child. There was the llama, with her long neck and her two bright eyes, and the fox, and the serpent. They had been there for as long as anyone could remember, watching over the runners, guiding them through the dark. Kispy felt a deep sense of belonging, of being part of something that stretched back into the past and forward into the future. He was not just a boy running through the mountains. He was a thread in the great fabric, a word in the endless story. And now, listener, Kispy is sleeping too, curled by the fire in a different tambo, his dreams filled with the rhythm of his own footsteps. The quipu continues its journey, handed from runner to runner, moving through the night like a current of electricity along a wire. It will reach its destination before dawn, and the words will be spoken, and the empire will adjust its course just a little. But let us stay with the quipu a moment longer. Let us consider the knots themselves. Each one is a tiny decision, a deliberate twist of the cord, a choice of color and placement. The Quipucamiocs, the keepers of the knots, spent years learning this language. They could read a quipu the way you read a page, listener, but with their fingers, with a touch that was almost intimate. They would run their hands over the cords, feeling the spacing of the knots, the texture of the fibers, the way the colors bled into one another. They would close their eyes, and the numbers and stories would rise in their minds like a song. There is a story told among the Quipucamiocs, a story that has been passed down through generations. It is about a messenger who arrived at a tambo with a quipu that was wet, the cords damp from a river crossing. The keeper took the quipu and tried to read it, but the water had loosened some of the knots, and the colors had run together, making the pattern unclear. The keeper was frustrated, angry even, because the message was urgent, and now it might be lost. But the messenger, who was old and wise, simply smiled and said, "The water has not destroyed the message. It has added to it." Now the quipu tells not only the words of the governor, but also the story of the river, the cold, the danger I faced. Read it again, and you will see. And the keeper did read it again with new eyes, and he found that the blurring of the colors had created a pattern he had never seen before, a pattern that spoke of struggle and survival, of a messenger who had refused to let the river take the message. The quipu became sacred after that, kept in a special place, because it carried not just information, but the spirit of the runner himself. That is the way of the Inca Empire, listener. Everything is connected. The mountains are alive. The rivers have voices. The stones remember. The runners do not simply cross the Andes. They become part of the Andes. They learn the names of the peaks, the moods of the passes, the habits of the wind. They know which paths are safe in the dark and which are treacherous, which streams are sweet and which are bitter. They carry the land in their bones, and the land carries them in its turn. And now, as the night deepens, let us think about the women who ran alongside the men. There were chasquis who were women, though they are less often spoken of. They ran the same roads, carried the same quipus, faced the same cold and wind. One of them, a woman named Killa, which means moon, was known for her ability to run through the darkest nights. She had been born with eyes that could see in dim light, or so the story said, and she would often volunteer for the runs that required more than human vision. She carried messages during the new moon when the stars were the only light, and she never lost her way. She ran with her hair braided tight, her feet wrapped in soft leather, and she knew every turn of the path by the feel of the ground under her soles. There is a tale told of Killa that on one particular night, the snow began to fall, thick and fast, covering the trail entirely. She could not see the markers, could not tell where the path ended and the precipice began. So she stopped and she listened. She closed her eyes and she let her other senses take over. She heard the sound of a stream far below, the rustle of a bird in a bush, the whisper of the wind through a cleft in the rock. And slowly, she began to move again, using these sounds as her guide. 3 times she had to stop and recalibrate. 3 times she had to trust that the mountain would not let her fall. And each time the path appeared before her, as if the snow itself parted to let her pass. When she reached the tambo, the keeper was astonished to see her. He had assumed no runner would come in such weather. But Killa simply handed him the kipu and said, "The moon does not need to shine for me to see. I have the light inside." And she sat by the fire and she slept, and in the morning she ran back again. So you see, listener, the courage of the messengers was not only in their legs, it was in their ears, their fingers, their hearts. They learned to read the world in ways that we have mostly forgotten. They paid attention deeply, continuously. They saw the tiny shifts in the sky, the movement of animals, the scent of the air before a storm. They were not just couriers. They were observers, guardians, the eyes of the empire. And now the empire is dust. But the attention, the care, the deep watching, that is still here. It lives in the way you pause to notice the colors of the sunset, in the way you listen to a friend's voice, in the way you hold a moment of stillness before you fall asleep. You are a messenger too, in your own way. You carry the message of your own life, of every moment you have lived, of every person you have loved. And the night is a tambo, a resting place, where you can let go of the burden and simply be. The embers in the imaginary fire have turned to ash now, and the only light comes from the stars, soft and distant. The runners are all sleeping or running or dreaming. The quipus are waiting, their knots holding stories that will never be fully told. And you, listener, are floating on the edge of sleep, where the world becomes soft and the boundaries blur. There is a word in Quechua, the language of the Inca, that some say cannot be translated. It is the word Aini. It means reciprocity, mutual giving and receiving, the balance that holds the universe together. The messengers embodied Aini. They gave their effort, their breath, their warmth, and the empire gave them food, shelter, respect. The mountains gave them a path, and they gave the mountains their footsteps. The night gave them darkness, and they gave the night their steady presence. You too have given to the world today. You have given your attention to this story, your trust, your willingness to be carried along the road of words. And in return, the story has given you rest, a gentle descent into the quiet, That is Aini, a small exchange, but a true one. So let the exchange be complete. Let the words recede into the background, like the sound of a river moving away from a campsite. Let your breath become the rhythm, the only rhythm that matters. The Andes are far away now, but the feeling of the high, cold air, the taste of coca leaves, the sight of a runner's silhouette against the moon, these things linger, like the memory of a dream. And the dream continues, even as you wake a little to the comfort of your own bed. The dream of a world held together by threads, by knots, by the steady beat of feet on stone. You are in that world. You have always been in that world. And it is safe, and it is warm, and it is waiting for you, just on the other side of sleep. Sleep, listener. Sleep as the messengers sleep, with the knowledge that you have run your own race today. Sleep as the keeper sleeps, with the fire banked and the door barred. Sleep as the mountains sleep, silent and patient, beneath the turning wheel of the stars. There's no more to say now. The story has reached its end, not because there is nothing left, but because there is nothing more that needs to be said. The rest is for you, in the quiet of your own mind, in the stillness of your own breath. Good night, listener. Good night, and sleep well. The road is at peace, and so are you. But wait, listener, before you drift off completely, let me tell you one more thing. There is a story that the old runners tell each other when the fire burns low and the night is deep and still. It is not a story of deeds or danger, but of a single moment, a tiny pause in the long journey of the empire. It is said that once, on a high pass in the Cordillera Blanca, two chasquis met at dusk, one coming from the north, the other from the south. They had run all day, each carrying a quipu that held the fate of a village, a message of tribute or of war. They met at a tambo that was nothing more than a ring of stones and a roof of woven grass. There was no keeper there, no fire, no food, just the wind and the fading light and two men who had never seen each other before. Under the rules of the road, they should have exchanged their quipus quickly and continued. The empire could not wait. But one of the runners, the older one, looked at the younger man and saw that his hands were trembling from the cold. He saw that the younger man's breath was ragged and his eyes were wide with a fear that came not from the path, but from the heart. The older runner did not speak of the quipu. Instead, he sat down on the cold stones and gestured for the younger man to sit beside him. He reached into his pouch and pulled out a handful of coca leaves, dried and brittle. He placed them in his mouth, chewed them slowly, and then offered a leaf to the younger runner. They sat there, the two of them, chewing coca in silence, while the stars came out one by one. The wind howled around the stones, but in that small circle of rock, there was a pocket of stillness. The younger man's hands stopped trembling. His breath slowed. After a long time, the older runner looked at him and said, "The message can wait a little longer. The empire will not fall if the news is delayed by the time it takes for two men to remember they are human." And they stayed there through the night, sharing the leaves and the silence. In the morning, they exchanged their quipus and parted. Neither ever saw the other again. But the younger runner, it is said, carried that night with him for the rest of his life. He told the story to his children, and his children told it to theirs. And so the memory of that small kindness, that pause in the rush of empire, lived on long after the roads were overgrown and the tambos crumbled. That is the heart of the Inca way, listener. It is not only about strength and speed and endurance. It is about knowing when to stop, when to sit down with a stranger, when to let the message wait so that the messenger does not break. The runners understood that the roads were alive, and that the people on them were more important than the words they carried. They ran with urgency, yes, but they also ran with a deep awareness that the world was not a machine to be driven, but a garden to be tended. And now, as the final embers of this story fade, I want you to carry that small image with you into sleep. Two men, high in the Andes, chewing coca leaves under a sky full of stars, sharing silence in a circle of stones. No urgency, no empire, no message. Just two human beings, present to each other, present to the cold, present to the vast and quiet night. That is the message of the messengers, the one that no quipu could ever hold. It is the message that the knots and chords and colors only point toward, like a finger aimed at the moon. The moon itself is silent and beautiful and beyond all telling. So let the words fall away now. Let the stories settle into the soft places of your mind, where all true stories go when they are done. The roads of the Inca are quiet now, covered by grass and time. The runners have become dust, and the quipus have become memories. But the silence they knew, the silence of two men who chose to stop running and simply be together, that silence is still here. It is in the space between your breaths. It is in the pause before you turn over and settle deeper into your pillow. It is in the last flicker of a thought before sleep takes it away. Listen, you can hear it. The silence of the high mountains, the silence of the long road, the silence of the heart that has run its race and found rest. Sleep, listener. Sleep as the mountains sleep, with your face to the stars and your feet on the earth. Sleep as the messengers sleep, with the knowledge that you have done enough. Sleep as the world sleeps under the turning wheel of the night. There is nothing more to say. The story is complete. The roads are at peace, and so are you. Good night.